you feeling good?
Yeah.
Jitters are out? All right. Hello, and welcome to another mini episode of the Critters and Cultures podcast. I'm your host and veterinarian, Dr. Azalea Boyd. And if you notice the noise that's happening around us, it is because we are live streaming from the biggest and boldest animal welfare conference in Canada. We are at the Summit for Animals Humane Canada Conference. And I've had the pleasure over the past 2 to 3 days to introduce and have discussions with amazing people in the animal welfare space. Today is no different. I have the pleasure of introducing Janel Griffieth. And so I am going to go ahead and start with your introduction and we'll take it away.
Okay.
All right. So Janel Griffieth is a passionate nonprofit professional and advocate for both people and animals. With nearly a decade of experience, Janel has worked across community engagement, public health, and animal welfare, from fostering pets to leading programs that saved thousands of kittens and puppies. She's also a strong voice for creating more inclusive spaces, making sure everyone feels welcomed and supported. And we are so excited to have her here today. Janelle, welcome to the Critters and Cultures podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually really excited because I love your podcast. So
Yes.
I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I will just go ahead and tell everyone, Janelle and I are friends, and she can't be your friend because she's mine. Okay, that's where we're going to start. But I absolutely love you being in this animal welfare space, and I think that you were probably one of the first people that I met when I started my work in the animal welfare space. So I'm so glad that our relationship has gotten to this point, and just the way that we support each other in our work. So tell me a little bit about your journey, your personal journey into animal welfare, your professional journey into animal welfare. I know we're going to get into kind of feelings of isolation as a person of color and what that means and tone and all of that. But tell me where this started for you.
So it's actually really funny because I actually didn't grow up with animals. A lot of people think, people in animal welfare have a lot of animals growing up. I didn't grow up with animals. Excuse me.
Yeah.
My parents didn't believe animals were part of the family. Like, they weren't in the house. They lived in the backyard type thing. But as a little girl, I've always loved animals, right? I think a lot of little girls want to be veterinarians when they grow up. You live the dream. And I've always just wanted to be around animals. And so when I was actually 22 years old, I met my soul dog, Dre.
Mm-hmm.
And that dog changed my life forever.
Yeah.
And that was what kind of led me into animal welfare, because I'm like, this dog was my bridge back to people, is what I call him, because I grew up with a lot of trauma. I had, all of these experiences, and Dre was like this reminder to me that to trust and to love.
Mm-hmm.
And if he could do that for me, and I thought that could never be possible, could you imagine what he could do for other people if they could find their Dre,
Right.
if they can find their soul dog? And so I thought about animal welfare and saving. I joined to save animals. Like, I wanted to save animals. I wanted to help as much as possible, but I also wanted people to experience this love that a soul dog can bring to them. And that's kind of my journey into it. And then, I think we wanted to talk about, and I wanted to mention too, part of my background is my mom is actually from the Philippines.
Yeah.
And in Vancouver, there was recently a tragedy that just happened, and somebody drove through a crowd. And it's just been kind of mind-blowing because I follow a lot of Filipino creators, and they were all there, and they all come from different parts of the...
Specifically a festival, right?
Right. So the Lapu-Lapu is actually pretty amazing because Lapu-Lapu, he stood strong against Spanish colonization.
Yeah.
So this is not only like a stand in like a unity for Filipinos, but it's a stand against colonization.
Right.
And so having something like that tragic happen at such a historic type of event is just crazy. And I've been seeing so many content creators that I follow and like really love. They just happen to all be there, and they come from different parts of the world. And actually, the person who makes this necklace that I have, which was made in dedication to my dog Dre, Sanchez Panay, she was there.
Wow.
And her booth almost got hit.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, we are actually recording this. What date is this? 4/29. And so I think this tragedy happened maybe about 2 days ago in Vancouver.
It did.
We're live streaming from Montreal, Quebec, but this happens in Vancouver. And you called it the Lapu Lapu Festival, right? And I just always have warmth when I talk about cultural festivities, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a time for communities to get together and celebrate and be in community with each other, right?
Yeah.
And eat the foods that they're used to, like,
Yeah.
all of that. And so it is definitely a tragedy. I'm glad that you brought that up and we're acknowledging and just holding some space for that. I do want to say that at the end of when we wrap this up, I will add some details where people can support. And I know that you had some links that you shared with me, so we'll make sure that we definitely do that. And thank you for sharing that about your Filipino background.
Yeah. So my mom she's an immigrant. I actually moved from the Philippines when I was about a year old.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were born in the Philippines.
I was born in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So technically I can get dual citizenship.
You probably should in the state of where we are in the country right now, right? Like have that backup plan. Okay, so we talked, and one of the things that we talked about, and we said we're going to touch on this podcast, is feeling isolated as people of color in the animal welfare and vet med space. Tell me what that means to you. What is that form of isolation?
So it's actually really interesting. When I first started in animal welfare, I lived in Oklahoma, and I thought it was just an Oklahoma thing because Oklahoma just doesn't have a diverse population. It's middle America, right?
Yeah.
So I never thought in my life.
Where is Oklahoma again?
Literally in the center of the country, in the Bible Belt, in the Tornado Alley. And because like the demographics there is, and I think it's like 85% white, non-Hispanic that live in Oklahoma, I actually didn't think animal welfare wasn't diverse.
Okay.
Isn't that crazy? I didn't think, I just thought it was Oklahoma. So when I went to a national level, I was like, oh, there's no diversity
anywhere
in this space. And I think it's because like in my head, like the way that I grew up, like even if my parents didn't love animals, I always loved them.
Okay.
So I just assumed in my head that like there was a lot of other people of color who loved the animals, which there are, and that we were all in these spaces. But then I kind of saw this, and I'm like, oh, I'm like one of a like, what is this, like less than 6%
in animal welfare.
And I started realizing how the scope of the issue and being like, wow, it is very, very isolating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the relationships I have garnered through animal welfare with other BIPOC, they're national.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of local people and a lot of local groups.
Right. And so I think this would be a perfect time to plug in the BIPOC Collective, right? You want to tell us a little bit about the group?
Yeah, so the BIPOC Collective actually, I'm glad it started. It started because there was this lack of diversity in animal welfare, and there was a lot of big harm being perpetrated against people of color in this industry. And I always say this, like, I understand that we come into this industry to save animals. Like, that's why I came into this industry.
Right. And that's why I became a veterinarian as well, right? It was very much animal driven, for sure.
It's all animals, but two things can be true at the same time, is what I always say. And unfortunately for people of color, we don't have the option of just ignoring the racism and like, the Black Lives Matter movement happened, the murder of George Floyd happened. We don't get the benefit of ignoring something like that and just focusing on animals because there's still like judgment and bias and racism that exists. So it's that part with the collective getting together and being like, we're here to support one another in this industry has been pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, so I will say that it definitely feels like a warm space, obviously, right?
Yes.
Because diversity is, and we could go into on a much longer episode, we only have 15 minutes today, we can go into why that is, right? Is it because it's exclusionary? Is it because when I walked in the doors, you didn't make me feel welcome and now I don't want to be here? I'll just keep taking care of my animals in the backyard type of thing? Is it because I don't have the resources or don't see myself becoming a veterinarian and I don't know what other things I can do with animals? Most people are just like veterinarian, and don't understand all of the different jobs that are in animal welfare. And it can be a heavy burden. So one of the things that I say when I do talks about being African American in vet med is that I'm probably going to burn out 10 times faster. And I'm sure there's research and data on this. I'm probably going to burn out 10 times faster than my white male counterpart in this space, right? Because what we then take on is this feeling like we have to champion diversity in the workplace. We have to, not just within the workplace, but make sure that the people that walk through the doors are getting treated fairly and respected. And we feel kind of protective over the people, the clients that come through the doors, right? And how actually challenging that is. But you mentioned something to me, and you talked about your personality. You talked about the fact that, people ask you to smile or they try to check you on your tone. I just want you guys to know that Janel just smiled, okay? She's practiced this smile. It's strange. But tell me about that.
So I actually brought this up. I was here presenting in Humane Canada Summit. It was been wonderful, and one of the things that I brought up and we wanted to bring up when we're talking about bringing diversity into animal welfare was my personal journey.
Yeah.
Ever since I started working, I have always had a separate meeting with the manager. It's never, and you can take this however you want to take it.
Right,
it's
right.
never been a person of color that's brought me in to have the conversation.
Huh.
But it's never the manager. It's always somebody like a colleague, and the comment is always, "Does she like me?
Oh.
Can you smile a little bit more at people?"
And so these are your colleagues talking to other colleagues.
And it gets to management, and management comes to me. And I always want to point out, in any employee review I have had since I started working right when I was 16. Like the minute I turned 16, I started working.
Okay.
Every comment I've gotten from a manager is, I never have to ask you. Like I'm never worried about what's going to happen because you get everything done.
You get your work done.
One of my previous managers, who I absolutely adored, she was like, "You have quarterback eyes. Like you can see down the field. You know what needs to get done."
Yeah.
The only time I usually get negative remarks is because I wasn't smiling enough or being too bubbly enough.
And so, what do you think that means? Like, why is that bothersome? How is that impacting your work on a day-to-day?
I think
because for me, to full transparency, I get the complete opposite. They're like, "Oh, here comes Dr. Boyd. She's bubbly, blip, 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 blip," right? And I'm like constantly smiling. But I will say that it was a training that I had that, my parents coming from the Caribbean, we, even within the household, if I walked around my house without smiling, I would get in trouble.
Yeah. I've actually heard that from many people.
I would get in trouble. My mom would say, "I have no bills to pay," and all of these
things.
Why aren't you smiling? You have nothing to worry about. So it's just like ingrained at this point, and now just part of my natural personality. But what does that mean for you in your work, in workspaces?
I think for me, it's observation, right? I will show up to work well groomed, smell nice, shower. I always dress appropriately. When I worked I ran our neonatal nursery. I made sure that everything was so clean, right? And I wanted all of us to wear scrubs, so we all looked very professional. We all looked really tidy. But I would see my colleagues and my counterparts who would show up, and no shade on them, but disheveled,
wrinkled,
right? Disheveled, wrinkled, looking like they're wearing yoga pants, but they never got comments. And so I'm like, why is it that I'm always getting a comment about my tone, but never about the level of professionalism? Because I don't think that tone indicates professionalism. Because naturally, I have a deeper voice for a female.
Yeah.
Naturally, I'm very monotone. I mean, even growing up, my parents, I remember one year my dad got me exactly what I asked for Christmas. And I was like, "Yay, thank you." And my dad goes, "Are you happy?
Are you happy?"
But see, this has been my entire child. This has been me my entire life.
Right.
And so it is very hard for me to get out of the zone of raising, my certain tone and getting high pitched. And I was telling you, the only time that pitches change is if you're a cute little tiny neonatal kitten or puppy.
Right.
And then my tone will change.
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think it's important to know, for multiple reasons, that you do not have to fit into a mold, and especially from a management situation, right? Stop trying to get everyone to be the same person, right? If you're concerned about someone's well-being, well, that's a little bit different, right? But get to know the people on your staff. Actually get to know your colleagues, right? Eventually your dad got to know that this is Janel, right?
That's how I act.
And yes, she is really happy, but she's not bouncing around like a bubbly ball, right? So I think
I'm happy on the inside.
She's happy on the inside, right? Yeah. And it can be a point of, again, I say we burn out pretty fast, right? It can be a sense of having that exclusion again, on top of being a Black woman or a person of color, now you're being told that you need to fit something that's comfortable for everyone else,
for other people.
you know, and what that does to your work. Like, now you're working and you were fine because you were happy taking care of the pets, and now you have this extra chip that you're trying to figure out at the same time. Is that right?
Correct. And I think the other part that bothers me about it, though, is that then if I get quiet, I get the same issue.
Right.
Why is she so quiet? Why is she? Because I also have RBF, and I can't help it. I mean,
Yeah,
like my
tell
face
us what
is
RBF is. Oh, shit.
resting, not so happy face.
RBF. First time that you've heard it on the Critters and Cultures podcast. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
It's just some people have different facial tones.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like, or facial tones, facial features.
Yeah, yeah.
And so even if I sit there quietly doing nothing, I would get the same response.
Oh my god.
So it was just like that's the part that gets me is like nobody's ever happy of like how I act.
Yeah.
Because naturally also I speak with my hands a lot.
Yeah.
I talk with my hands, and when I get really comfortable and I feel comfortable around people, I get loud and I talk passionately, and people translate as anger.
Right.
And then if I'm talking like that, I'm angry. But then if I'm quiet, I'm angry. And I'm like, I don't know how to be like anything different.
Well, exactly. So the point is that you are shining, and there is a light around you, and you are doing fabulous, amazing work, being just Janel. And I'm holding space for that. And again, I'm always here to support you in all of the things, and I'm glad that you're also here to support me. We're going to close, but you bring up a very important part about, you know, being loud, right? And being passionate. It's interesting because I talk a lot about cultural differences on the podcast, and some cultures actually, if you don't speak loud enough, that means you're not passionate. So if they, you know, if someone comes into a shelter or a clinic and they seem like they're yelling, right? It can be taken as, oh, they're being aggressive, but really, are they being aggressive, or are they just being passionate? Because if they're not being loud in their culture or expressive in their culture, it could mean that they actually don't care enough, right? So
I just want to, and to add to that, as a little Janel growing up, we would go to a lot of Filipino parties, right? Because my mom is Filipino.
Yeah.
And when you get a bunch of Filipino women together and they're all talking Tagalog, I mean, it goes from and it gets louder and louder and louder. And that was how I grew up. And not only that, and it's all fun. Like they're having a great time and laughing. And part of that laughter too is like hitting and like we slap each other and we laugh and we like move around. And it's just like that's how I lived my entire growing up. Like that's all I saw.
This is your culture. This is what you saw.
And also I just want to. I know we're running on time, but I just had to add this. Like when we talk about bringing more diversity into it, we also have to think like this is a predominantly woman field.
Yeah.
And that whole tone policing thing, nobody does that to men.
Yeah.
Because like I'll even talk to my husband and he'll send an email that says I need this done by Friday, period.
Wow.
But as a woman, we have to be like, oh my God,
will you please?
Can you please do this?
I would be so forever grateful.
Right. But like in his industry, there's such a good mix. There's a lot more men that and like saying that email is not rude.
Yeah.
They're just going, okay. But if we think about it, if we wanted more men into this movement, let's just say in particular, like just say men in general, it's the same thing. You think men are going to come in and be like, oh my God, girl, how are you? And so it's just like,
oh my gosh,
we have this like different expectation of how women should approach,
and how they should talk and how they should look and do all of these things that's acceptable or not acceptable. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I know we are at the end, and we will need an extended episode of this for sure. But thank you so much for sharing your personal experience and being vulnerable. And I love that you felt comfortable doing that and sharing that. And I feel so much of what you're saying and the spaces that I am as well. And so I will be sure that you give me show notes or anything that you want where people to find you. You foster a lot. I mean, I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge around.
You can put my Instagram on
your Instagram. Follow her on IG. Well, what is your IG?
So it's actually my name, Janel, JANEL _ great.
Okay. That makes sense. That's obvious. It's Janel _ great. And so Janel, thank you so much for joining us on the Critters and Cultures podcast. And thank you guys so much for tuning in today. And Janel, you were my
She's the best.
last you were my last guest. And so the Humane Canada Summit for Animals is over. We are going back to our sessions. Thank you so much for joining live. And if you're catching this on the replay, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, share, and show Janel some love. And we appreciate you live streaming with us today.